Hello and welcome. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 Ark creatures which are extremely overused. In at number 10 is the Rho Ganatha. Now, ever since this thing released, this has been an absolute boom in any Ark PvP player's life. And it has just been used so much to absolutely decimate PvP bases with its wealth of abilities and the fact they can pick up creatures like Rexes and just steal loads and loads of enemy creatures during raids. And at this point, the Rho Ganatha has become a bit of a problem in the PvP Ark space, as it is just so much more OP than pretty much every other creature in the game for that one specific use case that is just really unbalanced. And many people are questioning why this will be in ASA from day one, since Ark is kind of going for a bit more of a primitive theme now, and it is definitely leaning further towards that. And again, tech will be at the start of ASA 2, but that doesn't mean the Rho Ganatha is a bad creature at all. And I can say that for all of the creatures on this list actually, as all of these creatures on this list are good creatures. It's just I think they are overused a bit too much. But I would say largely the taming method is pretty fair, but I would say in future definitely Wildcard should debuff this thing, as right now it is just so unbalanced and it is so OP for PvP, which could be a good thing to quite a lot of people, but it is also a really bad thing, as you do want a lot of balance in those scenarios, as those alphas of the server are just going to get themselves a Rho Ganatha and absolutely decimate everyone else on the server, so no one else can actually have a good time. In at number 9 is the Pteranodon. Now again, the Pteranodon is a great creature, but I think largely it is overused a lot for a lot of things, and yes, it does fit those use cases very well, especially for raids in PvP. But in my opinion, there are better flyers out there that if you just put a little bit more effort into, you will have a significantly better flyer. The Crystal Wyvern is one for an example. Yes, you do need to get up to level 65 instead of 38 to ride that, but it is a much better tame, and if you do a very basic note run, you can get there pretty quickly and it won't really be too much of an effort. Definitely something I would recommend. Even though other maps do not have Crystal Wyverns, if you're on Crystal Isles, definitely give that a shot. But on other maps as well, sometimes I just skip the Pteranodon altogether and just save up for an RG or a Tapijara. Just a flyer which I will actually appreciate much more, as in a PvE scenario, after you've got the RG, the Pteranodon pretty much just becomes obsolete, as the Tapijara can be your faster flyer there, or you could use something like the Pelagornis maybe, and obviously the RG is just going to be that 100% utility dino. The RG is an absolute insane dino for utility, and definitely a good one, and definitely another overused creature as well. But I say the Pteranodon still fits into that category too, as it does seem to be a creature which every Ark player does go for, but for good reason. But I do think there are some other flyers out there in Ark which can be tamed relatively early on in your Ark playing progress that will give you a much nicer experience than the Pteranodon. Next up is the Carnotaurus. Now you can probably tell what I would say this thing is an overused creature. This thing is an absolutely insane beast of a carnivore. Obviously, loads of players are going to use it. And again, there aren't too many other options than the Carnotaurus for a creature of this size and skill level. But largely, I still think it is a bit of an overrated and overused dino, as it can't be used for bosses on every map. You'll need a creature like the Rex for that. And on Extinction, yes, it may be one of the best creatures out there for doing bosses, but just largely, it isn't a very useful creature, apart from obviously that combat. But again, I need to stress this enough, that does not mean it is a bad tame. And don't feel bad if you have tamed a Carnotaurus, because I'm saying it is overrated in a way. Obviously, it's overused, but it's still a very viable creature. And compared to a creature like the Rho Ganatha, it isn't as imbalanced in a PvP scenario, but definitely still extremely OP, as once it's in its blood rage, this thing will just rip through so many things and can definitely be a bit of an unbalance. And actually, I would like to see some less OP creatures in Ark in the future, as currently it just seems like we're getting loads of OP creatures and Ark is gradually getting even more unbalanced. Next up, we have the Giga. And again, this follows the same trail of thought as the Giganotosaurus. This is a big carnivore, which yes is great on extinction, but you can't take it into all of those boss fights. And overall, I would say the Giga is a worse creature than the Giganotosaurus, as it's slower, its stamina is worse, and obviously it has that blood rage. And it doesn't even have a bleed ability. Yes, wild ones do, but once tamed, it will lose that ability. And this was definitely a great creature back in 2016, and it added some absolute OPness to the game. That is definitely a very, very weird thing to say. OPness, insane, absolutely insane phrase. But either way, the Giganotosaurus is an extremely big carnivore. Again, a very, very good one. But by many is extremely overused, especially in the PvP space. That is obviously partly just because there isn't too many other creatures like this, apart from the Carnotaurus. But in my opinion, the Gigas are used a lot, like a lot. And there are some other creatures which can be extremely useful for the tasks that the Giga will do as well. And it can make everyone's Ark playing a bit better, especially those ones who are struggling a bit along the way, and they are just being absolutely decimated every day by the alphas of the server on Gigas or Carnotauruses. So overall, yes, Ark is a very unbalanced game, and the Giga and the Carnotaurus are definitely factors within that. Now, the Deinonychus. This is again an extremely useful creature which I do urge you to tame. But again, fitting into that PvP Ark theme, this creature is extremely overused for so many things. And again, there are some other creatures which you can use instead of this. And it is also partly just because of how OP these creatures are, except they aren't quite as OP as the Giga or Carnotaurus, even though their bleed ability does work extremely well on bosses. But obviously, unlike when the Raptor had that pounce ability, which luckily was removed, but apart from on Arboration for some reason, yeah, that was extremely more worse than what the Deinonychus has to its name. But the Deinonychus, in my opinion, is still a very overused creature. And obviously, for good reason, it's an extremely versatile creature. It can just travel really fast. It's a really nice creature. It inflicts a good amount of damage. It is just great at traversing across the map. But I do feel like now it's like, oh, the Deinonychus, and people just go on about it for ages, and I do go on about it quite a lot as well. But the Deinonychus, in my opinion, is quite overused, and I would like to see some other creatures of similar role to the Deinonychus that other Ark players out there can use, as it can really spice up the gameplay, as again, just playing as the same creature every single time can get really boring and makes Ark even more unbalanced than it already is. So in my opinion, the Deinonychus is a pretty overused dinosaur. In at number 5 is the Mwing, and yes, my favourite creature in Ark has been put into the overused category, as in my opinion the Mwing is an overused one. Obviously not one that I will stop using, but again, it is an extremely unbalanced creature as well, and hopefully some of these issues get fixed into ASA, and then all of them should be gone by the time Ark 2 hits, whenever that is. There may even be more delays past 2025. And again, the Mwing is a really great tame which you can find on maps like Gen 2 and Fjorda, and it will make your life significantly easy. But I think nowadays Ark life is just so easy that it is just so unbalanced, and creatures like this are overused so much, which makes Ark a much easier game, which is better for new players starting out. But when the transition to ASA hits, there will be a huge reality shock, as the game is said to be much harder as the AI is getting improved and other things like that. And also movement speed is being removed as well, so no insanely fast dinos zipping across the map, or your insanely fast, weirdly discombobulated character zooming across the beaches. Now, the Shadow Mane, an extremely useful creature, again found on Gen 2 and Fjorda. Like the Mwing, they did obviously originate from the same map, and in my opinion, this is an even more overused creature than the Mwing, and again, is an extremely OP one, which has a wealth of really great abilities. Again, like the hydration buff, it has pack buff, it has alpha buff, it just has pretty much anything, and it can charge its attack up over time, and it can even stun creatures. The list of the Shadow Mane's ability just goes on and on, and it is pretty much seemingly endless. The Shadowmane is again an extremely useful creature, one of which I urge you to tame at some point in Gen 2 or on Fjorda obviously. Obviously you'll need to prepare for this a lot though, as the tame for the Shadowmane can be really annoying, and it is not an easy one, although some of you out there have said, oh, these Shadowmanes are really easy to tame, but especially for those people who haven't tamed a Shadowmane before, a Shadowmane is not an easy tame, but I do urge you to tame one at some point. In at number 3 is the Reaper. Now this creature is a significantly older one than the others that are found on this list, but also one which is extremely overused, obviously like all the other creatures which you will find on this list. And the Reaper is especially useful in PvP, as it is just a really fast, quick, agile creature that can just get the job done. It will deal all the damage necessary, it will absolutely decimate all of the creatures in the area. These things can easily take out Gigas, like no problems at all, and then they can just raid the base and then just get out. And again, it's leaning into Ark's balance again, as now with all of the transfers over many maps, the balance of Ark is definitely thrown off, and I wouldn't mind if you weren't able to transfer across maps, and the creatures on every map were built to be used on said map, and then it was so balanced for that map. Tell me down below if you agree with that, or you prefer to just transfer the most OP creatures over from other maps. Yet again, talking about Ark being an unbalanced game. But what would you expect? It has built up significantly since its release in 2015. All the way now, it's over 8 years old, which seems absolutely insane now. And yes, you can definitely see why it's an unbalanced game, but the Reaper is 100% a contributor to griefing on PvP. In at number 2 is the Rock Drake. Now, obviously, the Rock Drake is going to be an overused creature, like the Reaper. But why is it more overused than the Reaper? And that is mainly just because this thing is significantly faster than the Reaper, and it is just more agile and more stealthy, which is why it is better for PvP than the Reaper, apart from just completely, absolutely decimating bases by brute force. And you'll see many people in the PvP space going around on Rock Drakes or Managarmas, so I'm kind of going to include the Managama in the number 2 spot as well, kind of as a little honorable mention there, as the Managama is an extremely used PvP tame, which is extremely overused, and the Managama at this point is probably one of my least favourite tames because of how much it has been griefed on with PvP. But either way, back to the Rock Drake, like the Managama, is just a stealthy, quick creature which can zip across the map with ultimate speed and just decimate everyone. And essentially, this creature, to all of the noobs out there, can just ruin your day completely. And obviously, it's meant to be a late game creature, but when you're interacting with other players on this thing and just absolutely griefing them, this thing is just so OP compared to anything they can imagine using, that the progress is pretty much just set back to naught for them, which is obviously why I'm not really an Ark PvP player, as I'm not really into the progression of just losing all my stuff and building back up again, even though I will say the combat is pretty fun. The Rock Drake is definitely an overused tame, which I wouldn't mind getting some sort of nerf in the future, but I'm sure many of you out there would be very unhappy with that. And finally, in at number 1 is the Rex. Now, what would you expect? The Rex is by far one of the most used Ark creatures out there, and definitely one at which every single Ark player will look up to when they start playing. The Rex, by far, is one of the most well-known dinosaurs out there, and it is no lie that many Ark players will go after the Rex because of just how cool they think it is, and it definitely is a very useful creature in the space of Ark, being one of the best for bosses because unlike the Giga and the Carnotaurus, it can be let into bosses, and it is an extremely balanced creature with no kind of things that will make the creature rage or get out of control. It's got a great health stat, it's got a great melee stat, although its mobility and stamina and weight aren't great, you do not need that for combat. But by now, you can definitely tell why the Rex is an overused creature. If every Ark player started Ark and tamed a Rex, there would be a lot of Rexes that people would have tamed, and pretty much every Ark player that has started Ark and made significant progress, meaning that they've played probably at least an in-game week or in-game month of Ark, then they would have tamed a Rex at some point. And they're not really a difficult tame, they're widespread across pretty much all of Ark on every map, and they're just easy again, they're just quick, they're not very difficult, and they're not very expensive tames either, which is definitely why they are so popular and in my opinion extremely overused. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and comment down below 10 art creatures which you think are extremely overused, as I'd really like to hear your thoughts, and I will see you all later.